Ryu Seontai stood at the microphone in the Grand Hyatt Seoul ballroom, 300 shareholders staring at him like vultures circling wounded prey. The merger announcement was supposed to be routine: sign the papers, shake hands, let the cameras capture another billion-dollar triumph. But Kang Min-jae had just stood up from the third row, holding a medical document like a grenade with the pin already pulled. "Mr. Ryu?" Kang's voice cut through the polite murmurs. "Before we finalize this partnership, I think the board deserves transparency. You have deuteranopia, don't you? Red-green color blindness diagnosed 7 years ago?" The room froze. Han Ji-woo's hand tightened around her tablet at the side of the stage, her face a careful mask of professional calm, even as her knuckles went white. Seontai felt the familiar weight of exposure. The thing he'd hidden behind perfect logistics algorithms and impeccable gray suits for years, now stripped bare under fluorescent corporate lighting. He could deny it. He could have his lawyers bury Kang in defamation suits before sunset. That was what a Cheeble heir would do, what his mother would demand he do. But then he remembered a rainy night in Lisbon 3 months ago. A woman with natural kinky hair and eyes that saw through every careful defense he'd built, holding an acrylic tube filled with light designed for people like him. People the world wasn't built for. "Yes," Seontai said quietly into the microphone. "I have deuteranopia." The ballroom erupted. Camera flashes exploded like small bombs. Someone gasped. Kang Min-jae smiled with the satisfaction of a man who'd just won a war without firing a shot. And somewhere in the back of the room, hidden behind a marble pillar, Zora Ellington heard the man she'd almost given up on choose truth over empire. The question hanging in the air wasn't whether he'd survive this revelation. It was whether she'd step forward to stand beside him when the world tore him apart. Would you risk everything you've built for someone who teaches you to see the world differently? Subscribe and stay with us. This story of impossible choices and radical vulnerability is just beginning. 3 months earlier, Zora Ellington sat in a Lisbon City Council meeting feeling like a defendant in a trial where the verdict was already decided. 6 bureaucrats in tired suits reviewed her lighting proposal for Alfama, with the enthusiasm of people forced to attend their nephew's amateur theater production. "Ms. Ellington," the lead councilman said, pronouncing her last name with 3 extra syllables. "This is creative, but Alfama doesn't need art. It needs functional streetlights." Zora kept her hands flat on the table, a trick she'd learned to prevent herself from clenching fists that white colleagues read as aggressive. "With respect, senor, I'm proposing both. Adaptive LED systems that respond to pedestrian movement, preserve the neighborhood's visual identity, and reduce light pollution by 40%. The elderly residents are afraid to walk home after dark. This solves that without turning Alfama into a shopping mall." One councilwoman leaned forward, her reading glasses catching the overhead fluorescence in a way that made her eyes unreadable. "And who pays for this experimental system when it fails in 6 months? When, not if." Zora felt the familiar burn of being dismissed before she'd even begun. "The pilot program is privately funded. If it fails, the city pays nothing. If it succeeds, we expand." "Privately funded by whom?" Zora hesitated. Her previous private funding had come from James Whitmore, her ex-boyfriend who'd turned her Detroit lighting project into a gentrification advertisement, and then blamed her when community leaders called it cultural erasure. She'd sworn never again, but rent in Lisbon wasn't paid with principles. "Anonymous donor," she said carefully. "Contract specifies no creative interference, no branding, no publicity." The councilman exchanged glances with his colleagues, the universal language of bureaucrats about to say no in 12 different ways. "We'll take it under advisement. You'll have our answer in 6 weeks. 6 weeks. In bureaucrat time, that meant never. Zora left the municipal building into a Lisbon afternoon that smelled like roasting chestnuts and diesel fumes, her portfolio bag heavy against her shoulder. Her phone buzzed. Maya Santos, her best friend, and the only person in Portugal who understood what it meant to be a black woman in European design spaces. "Maya, how bad?" Zora. They looked at me like I proposed replacing all the tiles with LED screens. Maya. Rich white men threatened by competent black woman, tale as old as colonialism. Drink tonight? Zora. Rain check. Need to recalibrate the Alfama prototype before Teresa thinks I'm all talk. Teresa Ribeiro, the 62-year-old community leader who'd lost her daughter to a poorly lit alley 15 years ago, was the only reason Zora kept fighting municipal indifference. Teresa had seen the prototype designs and cried, not delicate tears, but the bone-deep sobs of someone who'd lived with preventable tragedy long enough to recognize hope when it finally arrived. Zora took the tram to Alfama, standing because the seats were packed with tourists photographing each other like they'd discovered a theme park instead of people's actual neighborhood. She got off at Rua de Bica and climbed the cobblestone steps that turned treacherous when wet, mentally cataloging every shadow that could hide danger, every corner where light died. The community patio was empty except for Teresa hanging laundry on a line strung between buildings that predated the concept of zoning laws. The older woman looked up, saw Zora's face, and knew immediately. They said no. They said 6 weeks, which is bureaucrat for no. Zora set down her bag and helped Teresa clip a bedsheet to the line. But the prototype is ready for field testing. If we can show results, real data on foot traffic, safety, energy savings, they can't ignore it. Teresa's expression was the careful neutrality of someone who'd learned not to hope too loud. And if it doesn't work, then I go back to Detroit with my dignity, and you never have to look at my face again. Teresa swatted her arm. Don't talk like that. You're not like the others who come here with their urban renewal plans that mean kicking us out for boutique hotels. She paused, studying Zora with the intensity of someone deciding whether to share a dangerous secret. I got a call yesterday. A man, Korean accent, asking about you. Wanted to know if you were legitimate or another vulture. Zora's stomach tightened. What did you tell him? That you eat at my table, help with my laundry, and design light like it's holy work. Then I told him if he was thinking of throwing money at you to make himself feel important, I'd find him and break his kneecaps. Teresa smiled grimly. He laughed. Said he'd already donated anonymously and wanted to make sure it reached the right person. The anonymous donor. Zora felt something between gratitude and violation, because help always came with strings, even when they promised it didn't. Did he leave a name? Just said to tell you. Some people see better in darkness. Teresa shrugged. Rich people and their riddles. But his money cleared and you needed it, so I didn't ask questions. That night, Zora installed the first prototype at the patio's north entrance. A slender pole with motion-responsive LEDs that created pools of warm amber light without the harsh glare of traditional street lamps. She programmed the system to recognize pedestrian movement and adjust intensity accordingly, bright enough for safety, dim enough to preserve the night sky and the neighborhood's intimate scale. It was 10:47 p.m. when she finished calibrating the sensors. Rain started at 10:51. The kind of cold Lisbon drizzle that seeped into bones and turned cobblestones into skating rinks. At 10:53 she slipped. The acrylic tube, 2,000 euros of custom LED arrays, 3 weeks of 3D modeling, the entire project's proof of concept, slipped from her grip and rolled downhill toward the storm drain with the inevitability of Murphy's Law. Zora lunged. Her knee hit stone. The tube kept rolling. A hand caught it 5 centimeters from oblivion. She looked up into the face of a man who shouldn't exist in this neighborhood at this hour. Korean, early 30s, wearing a suit that cost more than her monthly rent, soaked through but unbothered, holding her project like it was a newborn instead of a piece of technical equipment. It still has battery, he said in English with a soft Seoul accent, tilting the tube to examine the flickering LEDs. Do you need an outlet? Zora stayed crouched on the wet cobblestones, processing. Expensive suit, gentle hands. Here, now, in a rainstorm. The impossible convergence of circumstances that her trauma-trained brain immediately labeled as too convenient. Who are you? Suspicion sharpened her voice into something between question and accusation. He met her eyes without flinching, and she saw something unexpected. Exhaustion. The kind that came from being treated like an ATM with good cheekbones instead of a human being. "Someone who was in the right place," he said carefully, extending the tube toward her. "Or the wrong one. I don't know yet." Ryu Seontae had not planned to be in Alfama at 11 p.m. in a rainstorm. He'd planned to be in his hotel suite reviewing quarterly logistics reports and pretending the loneliness didn't feel like drowning. But then Han Ji-woo had mentioned, carefully casual over their 8th coffee meeting of the day, that the lighting designer he'd anonymously funded was field testing her prototype tonight in Alfama, and perhaps he might want to see where his money was going, not to interfere, just to observe from a respectful distance. Ji-woo was his assistant, his gatekeeper, and occasionally his conscience. She knew him well enough to recognize when he needed an excuse to do something reckless disguised as due diligence. So he'd gone. Parked 3 blocks away, walked through rain that ruined his Tom Ford suit, and watched from the shadows as Zora Ellington created light with the focused intensity of a surgeon performing transplant surgery. He'd seen her TEDx talk 6 months ago, lighting as liberation, designing safety without surveillance, and been struck by the radical simplicity of her thesis, that poor neighborhoods deserved beautiful, thoughtful illumination, instead of harsh security spotlights that felt like occupation. She talked about Detroit, about how light could restore dignity without erasing identity, about designing for communities instead of for awards. She hadn't mentioned that she moved through space like water finding its level, or that her hands worked with the kind of precision that came from caring deeply about details invisible to most people, or that she was the most compelling person he'd ever seen who wasn't performing for cameras. And she definitely hadn't mentioned that she was black, which shouldn't have mattered, except that Seontae knew exactly what she'd face in spaces like Seoul, where diversity meant a white person at the conference table. When she slipped and the tube fell, his body moved before his brain approved the decision. Logistics genius, his board called him. The man who could optimize supply chains in his sleep, who saw patterns where others saw chaos. What they didn't know was that his deuteranopia had trained him to see structure instead of color, to recognize shapes and contrasts that normal vision missed. The tube was transparent, catching streetlight and rain in a way that made it easy to track even as it rolled. He snatched it without thinking, then looked up to see Zora staring at him with the defensive wariness of someone who'd been burned by helpful men before. "Who are you?" she demanded. Seontae could have said, "Ryu Seontae, CEO of Hanbeat Maritime Solutions, Seoul's youngest self-made billionaire, the man whose anonymous donation is funding your project." But that would have made her look at him the way everyone looked at him, like a walking bank account. "Someone who is in the right place," he said instead, offering her the tube. "Or the wrong one. I don't know yet." She took the tube without taking her eyes off him, rising to her feet with the careful balance of someone navigating slippery ground in multiple senses. "That's not an answer. Ryu Seontae." He bowed slightly. Not the deep formal bow of Korean business culture, but the subtle acknowledgement of shared space. "I'm in Lisbon for a shipping conference. I heard about the Alfama project. I'm interested in adaptive urban systems." All technically true. All carefully incomplete. Zora studied him with the intensity of someone trained to spot lies. Shipping executives don't usually wander around Portuguese slums at midnight in €1,000 suits. 2,000, he corrected automatically, then winced. I didn't mean to flex your money?" But her mouth twitched toward almost smile. "Do you know anything about generators? Because this installation needs to work tonight, or the city council uses its failure as an excuse to kill the whole program." Seontae looked at the prototype pole, the tangle of wires, the portable generator sputtering in the rain. His brain, the same one that had revolutionized cold chain logistics for temperature-sensitive pharmaceuticals, clicked into problem-solving mode. "I know about power optimization," he said. "Show me the system specs." They worked in the rain for 40 minutes. Zora explained her adaptive algorithm. Seontae rewired the generator connection to reduce voltage inconsistency. She calibrated LED intensity. He calculated optimal sensor placement using shadow angles. His deuteranopia-trained brain processed faster than her color-dependent measurements. At 11:34 p.m., the system stabilized. Warm amber light bloomed across the patio in responsive pools that followed movement without flooding the space with harsh brightness. Two elderly women emerged from a doorway, paused, then walked slowly across the newly lit courtyard. One of them waved at Zora with the casual gratitude of someone whose life had just gotten measurably safer. Seontae watched Zora watch them, and saw her face transform, from defensive professional to someone witnessing her purpose made tangible. "Aren't you going to ask what I'm doing?" she said without looking at him. He could have said something diplomatic. Instead, he told the truth. "You're making people go home without fear. It doesn't need a caption." She turned then, really looked at him for the first time without suspicion, as the primary filter. Her expression shifted through several emotions too fast for him to name, landing on something that looked dangerously close to recognition. "I'm Zora." "Seontae." They didn't shake hands. Both were wet, filthy with electrical grime, exhausted. But they stood there in the rain for 5 seconds longer than necessary, as if their respective brains were trying to archive something important about this moment. A camera flash cut through the darkness. Seontae's head snapped toward the source, instincts honed by years of avoiding paparazzi triggering immediate alarm. A figure ducked into the alley, too fast to identify, but the damage was done. Someone had photographed them together, in Lisbon, at midnight, in a neighborhood that could be described as slum by journalists looking for scandal angles. Zora saw his expression change, watched him transform from helpful stranger to guarded public figure in the space of a heartbeat. Problem? Potentially. He pulled out his phone, texted Jiwoo a single word. "Photo." Her response came in 3 seconds. "I'm on it." He looked back at Zora, calculated risks and potential damages, and made a choice. "I should go. This was..." "Don't." She crossed her arms, and he saw the walls going back up. "Don't do the thing where you were charming and helpful and then disappear like I imagined you. If you're about to ghost because someone took a picture, just say that. I'm a grown woman. I can handle honesty." The directness was so unexpected, so refreshing after years of corporate doublespeak and social performance, that Seontae almost laughed. "I'm not ghosting. I'm trying to protect you from being in tabloids tomorrow as Korean billionaire's Lisbon mystery woman." Zora blinked, processed. "Billionaire?" "Self-made," he clarified, as if that distinction mattered. "Maritime logistics. It's incredibly boring except for the money. And the tabloids. Those too." She looked at him for a long moment, then down at the tube in her hands, then back up with an expression he couldn't quite read. "The anonymous donor. Teresa said he was Korean. That was you." Not a question. An accusation. "Yes," Seontae said, "because lying would be worse. I saw your TEDx talk. I researched your work. You're trying to do something that matters with people who can't afford to pay you what you're worth. I wanted to help without me knowing," Zora finished. "Without me feeling obligated or compromised or like I owed you something. Yes, that's either very thoughtful or very controlling." She studied his face like she was trying to solve an equation with too many variables. "I haven't decided which. Can I know when you do? Despite everything, the rain, the exhaustion, the photograph that was probably already on its way to Korean gossip sites." She smiled, small, wary, but real. "Give me your number. I'll let you know." He did. She didn't call him that night, or the next day, or the day after that. But 4 days later, at 2:37 a.m. Seoul time, 6:37 p.m. Lisbon time, his phone lit up with a message from an unknown number. Unknown. "I decided it's thoughtful. Suspicious and maybe paternalistic, but thoughtful. Want to buy me coffee and explain why a billionaire cares about lighting design? Seontae, who was reviewing container ship manifests in his glass-walled office overlooking Seoul's night skyline, felt something unfamiliar and dangerous unfold in his chest. Something that felt like possibility. Seontae. Tomorrow. 7 p.m. your time. You pick the place. Unknown. This is Zora, by the way, in case you give your number to women in rainstorms regularly. Seontae. You're the first. He stared at his phone for 3 full minutes after sending that text, wondering if he'd just made a brilliant decision or a catastrophic mistake. In Lisbon, Zora read his response, felt her stomach do something complicated, and decided not to overthink it. Some risks were worth taking, even when they came with paparazzi and gossip columns, and the kind of complications that definitely weren't in her project budget. The coffee shop Zora chose was aggressively unglamorous. Café Routine, a deliberately ironic name for a place frequented by broke artists, elderly Portuguese men arguing about football, and exactly 0 tourists who Instagrammed their lattes. She arrived 15 minutes early with her laptop, ordered a galon she didn't drink, and pretended to review project timelines while actually spiraling through increasingly paranoid Google searches. Ryu Seontae shipping brought up 847,000 results. Ryu Seontae billionaire added another 2.1 million. Ryu Seontae dating opened a rabbit hole of Korean gossip sites she couldn't read, but whose photos told a clear story. Him at charity galas with beautiful women in designer gowns, him bowing to elderly chaebol matriarchs, him standing alone at corporate events looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. Notably absent. Photos of him smiling like he meant it. Also notably absent until 4 days ago. Photos of him in Lisbon looking rumpled and helpful in the rain. That photo, grainy, taken from an awkward angle, but unmistakably him and unmistakably her, was now circulating on Korean celebrity gossip forums, with speculation ranging from escort to humanitarian project to creative theories involving corporate espionage. Maya had texted that morning, "You're dating a billionaire and didn't tell me?" Zora had responded, "I'm drinking coffee with someone I met 4 days ago. That's not dating." Maya, "He flew back to Lisbon for coffee. That's dating." Which was technically true. Seoul to Lisbon was an 18-hour journey. For coffee. Zora closed her laptop with more force than necessary as Seontae walked through the cafe door at exactly 7 RPM, because apparently billionaires believed in punctuality. He'd traded the expensive suit for dark jeans and a gray sweater that probably still cost more than her rent, but at least didn't scream corporate overlord. He spotted her, and something in his face relaxed, like he'd been half convinced she wouldn't show. "You came back to Lisbon for coffee," she said as he sat down across from her. Not a question, an opening move. "I came back because you asked," he corrected, signaling the server with a subtle gesture that suggested he'd spent time in service industry spaces. "And because I have shipping contracts in Porto that made the trip justifiable to my assistant, who thinks I'm reckless." "Are you?" Increasingly. The server appeared. Seontae ordered an espresso in Portuguese that was heavily accented but grammatically correct, which earned an approving nod from the elderly man at the next table. When the server left, Seontae folded his hands on the table and looked at Zora with the directness of someone done with small talk. "I need to tell you something that will probably make you walk out." Zora's defenses snapped up like riot shields. "If this is the part where you explain that your donation comes with creative control..." "No." He cut her off, sharp enough to surprise them both. "The donation has no strings. I put it in writing. Teresa has the contract. But there's something else." He paused, and she watched him decide how much truth to risk. "I have deuteranopia, red-green color blindness, diagnosed when I was 27 after I spent my entire life wondering why color coding systems never made sense to me." Of all the confessions Zora had braced for, that wasn't on the list. "You're colorblind. Specifically, I can't distinguish reds and greens reliably. They both look like variations of brown or gray. Blues and yellows I see fine." He met her eyes. "I'm telling you because you work with light and color, and I don't want you to find out later and think I was hiding a conflict of interest. Zora's brain raced through implications. Lighting design depended on spectral relationships, color temperature, the interplay of warm and cool tones. Someone who couldn't see those distinctions would theoretically be at a disadvantage in understanding her work. Except the other night, she said slowly, when you rewired the generator. You used contrast and shadow angle, not color-coded wires. I've learned to compensate. That's not compensating. That's seeing differently. She leaned forward, her coffee forgotten. Most designers rely on color as the primary variable, but light isn't color. It's luminosity, contrast, shadow depth. You processed that faster than I did. Because I have to, he said quietly. Color is a shortcut for most people. I don't get shortcuts. No, Zora said, and felt her entire understanding of the Alfama project shift like tectonic plates finding new alignment. You get patterns, structure, the fundamental architecture of light without the distraction of chromatic noise. He stared at her like she'd just spoken a language he'd forgotten existed. Most people, Seontai said carefully, react to my deuteranopia either with pity or skepticism about my competence. You just called it an advantage. Because it is, in your context. Zora pulled her laptop open, fingers already flying across the keyboard. What if we redesigned the Alfama system to be fully accessible for color blindness, not as accommodation, as the primary design principle? Light intensity and directionality instead of color temperature. It would work better for elderly users with declining vision, for people with cataracts, for anyone whose eyes don't process color normally. You'd rebuild your entire project? I'd build it better. She looked up, and the excitement in her face was incandescent enough to make his careful control slip. This is what I mean by inclusive design. Not slapping a ramp on stairs, creating the ramp as the primary path, and realizing it works better for everyone. Seontae felt something dangerous and unfamiliar happening, being seen without the mediation of money, status, or performance. Zora looked at his color blindness and saw potential instead of deficit. She looked at him and seemed to recognize something worth her ruthless honesty. I don't know how to do this, he admitted. Do what? Be around someone who doesn't want anything from me except the conversation. Zora's expression softened into something that might have been empathy if it wasn't laced with wariness. I need you to understand something. The last man who helped my career turned my work into a gentrification ad campaign, and then blamed me when the community I was trying to serve called me a sellout. So I have rules. I don't date donors, I don't accept money that comes with unspoken expectations, and I don't trust men who solve problems with their wallets instead of their presence. Those are good rules, Seontae said. So why are you still sitting here? He considered her question with the seriousness it deserved. Because you asked me to coffee. Because you're the first person in years who's talked to me like I'm a human being instead of a bank account. And because when I watched you create light that made elderly women feel safe enough to walk home, I thought, that's what success should look like. Zora studied him with the careful attention of someone trying to spot the manipulation angle. When she didn't find one, her shoulders dropped half an inch. A tiny surrender of defensive posture. Okay, she said. Here's what's going to happen. We're going to finish coffee. You're going to tell me about maritime logistics, so I can decide if it's actually boring or you're just bad at explaining interesting things. And then we're going to walk through Alfama while I show you why lighting design matters, and you're going to tell me if my color choices are alienating 8% of the population. That sounds like a date, Seontae observed. It's a professional consultation, Zora corrected. That I'm doing at 7 p.m. on a Friday for a donor I'm not supposed to be personally involved with. So definitely a date. Despite herself, despite every instinct screaming about rich men and complications and photos on gossip sites, Zora smiled. Shut up and tell me about shipping containers. He did. Turned out maritime logistics wasn't boring when explained by someone who saw it as a massive three-dimensional puzzle about moving essential resources to people who needed them without waste. He talked about pharmaceutical cold chains and refugee supply optimization, about using algorithms to reduce carbon emissions, and designing routes that avoided piracy zones. Zora, who'd expected tech bro posturing about disruption, found herself leaning across the table, asking follow-up questions, challenging his assumptions about last-mile distribution in informal settlements. They talked for 2 hours. The coffee went cold. The elderly Portuguese men left. The server started wiping down tables with increasing pointedness. "We should go," Zora said, but neither of them moved. "I don't want to," Seontai admitted. "Every time I leave a conversation with you, I go back to my real life and remember how performative everything else feels." It was too honest, too much too fast. Zora felt the familiar panic of intimacy she hadn't asked for. "You don't know me," she said. "You saw a TED Talk and fixed a generator. That's not... I know you measure moonlight to calibrate your designs because you mentioned it in a podcast interview 3 months ago." He said it quietly, without drama. "I know you turned down a fellowship at MIT because they wanted you to focus on smart city surveillance systems, and you think surveillance dressed as safety is still surveillance. I know you eat dinner at Teresa's house twice a week because she told me, and that kind of integration into community doesn't happen unless you show up as a person, not a savior." Zora's throat felt tight. "You researched me. I did due diligence before donating to your project," he corrected. "And then I kept reading because you were the most interesting person I'd encountered in years." "That's creepy." "Probably," he agreed. "Should I apologize?" She wanted to say yes. Wanted to rebuild her walls and walk out and go back to the clean simplicity of work that didn't involve complicated men with complicated money and eyes that looked at her like she was a mystery worth solving. Instead, she said, "Show me your phone." Seontai unlocked it without hesitation and handed it over. The gesture of someone with either nothing to hide or everything to lose. Zora scrolled through his recent searches. Adaptive LED systems, inclusive design principles, Deuteranopia compensation strategies, Zora Ellington interviews. Also, interracial relationships, Korea stigma, dating across wealth gaps, how not to be a controlling rich person. She looked up. He met her eyes without flinching, and she saw the vulnerability there, the willingness to be seen researching how not to fuck this up. "You Googled how not to be controlling," she said. "The results were depressing," he admitted. "Mostly advice about not buying expensive gifts or using money to make decisions for your partner, which I'd already figured out, but apparently many wealthy men haven't. And the thing about interracial relationships in Korea?" His jaw tightened. "My mother is traditional. She believes family legacy requires ethnic and class homogeneity. I wanted to know what you'd face if this," he gestured between them, "became something public. You're thinking 10 steps ahead for something that's currently a coffee date." "I'm a logistics strategist," Seontae said. "I think in supply chains and risk mitigation. It's pathological." Zora handed back his phone, her expression unreadable. "Okay. New rule. If we do this, whatever this is, you don't get to preemptively solve problems I haven't asked you to solve. You don't get to throw money at complications. And you definitely don't get to manage my relationship with your family like it's a corporate merger." "Those are good rules," he said again. "Can you follow them?" He was quiet for a long moment, and she appreciated that he didn't offer easy promises. "I can try. But I need you to tell me when I'm failing, because my instinct is to fix things with resources. It's how I've survived. And my instinct is to run when men try to fix me," Zora said. "So we're both going to be terrible at this." "Probably." They looked at each other across the small table in the now empty cafe. Two people from irreconcilable worlds trying to figure out if the space between them was a bridge or an abyss. "Walk with me," Zora said finally. "Let me show you what light can do when it's built with intention." They walked through Alfama as twilight turned to full dark, and Zora narrated her vision. Adaptive systems that responded to density, preservation of shadow as visual rest, lighting that revealed architectural texture instead of flattening it. Shantae watched how she moved through the space, greeting elderly residents, stopping to adjust a prototype sensor, kneeling to examine a cobblestone's reflective properties, and understood that this wasn't just professional work. This was love made tangible. At the top of a steep stone staircase, she stopped and pointed up. "See that? No light pollution. You can actually see stars." Seontae looked up at the Lisbon night sky, then back at her face illuminated by the soft amber glow of her own design, and thought, "I am so far out of my depth. I see them," he said. What he didn't say, "I see you, and you're brighter than any of them." But she heard it anyway, in the silence between words, and felt the dangerous flutter of something that might become trust if she was reckless enough to let it. Behind them, a camera clicked. They both tensed, scanned the darkness, saw nothing. "They're getting bolder," Seontae said grimly. "They?" Zora's stomach sank. "This is going to be a regular thing, isn't it? People following you, us. If we keep seeing each other, yes." He looked at her with painful honesty. "I can't give you privacy. I can pay for security, control the narrative through PR firms, threaten lawsuits, but I can't make you invisible. And I know that for you, invisibility is sometimes safety." It was the most privileged thing he could have said, and also the most perceptive. Zora had spent years navigating spaces where being noticed as a black woman meant being either exoticized or criminalized. The idea of choosing visibility, of being photographed and speculated about and reduced to billionaire's girlfriend, felt like volunteering for a different kind of violence. "I need to think," she said. "Of course." He stepped back, hands in pockets, giving her physical space as visible commitment to emotional space. "I'm staying at the Palacio until Tuesday. If you want to see me, text. If you don't, I'll understand." He walked away before she could respond, disappearing into Alfama's labyrinth of alleys with the ease of someone who'd memorized the terrain. Zora stood under her own lighting design, feeling the weight of a decision she wasn't ready to make. Her phone buzzed. Maya, of course. "Maya, please tell me you didn't fall for the sad rich boy routine." "Zora." He Googled how not to be controlling after our first conversation. "Maya. Maya. Okay, that's actually emotionally intelligent, which is deeply unfair. Maya. But also he could hire someone to teach him to say the right things. Rich people do that." "Zora. I know. I'm not naive." "Maya. You're not naive, but you are lonely, and lonely makes us all stupid." Zora looked at her phone, at Maya's name on the screen, and felt the truth of it. She was lonely. She'd been lonely since James turned her work into a weapon, since she'd fled Detroit for Lisbon to escape the reputation damage, since she'd decided that keeping her work pure meant keeping everyone else at arm's length. But Seontae had held her project like it mattered, had confessed his colorblindness like trust was a risk worth taking, had researched interracial relationship stigma not to fix it, but to understand what she'd face. That wasn't manipulation. That was someone trying to show up with intention. "Zora. I'm going to see him again." "Maya. I know, just promise me. The second he tries to control you with money, you walk." "Zora. I promise." She meant it. But she also couldn't shake the memory of his face when she'd called his deuteranopia an advantage. The shock of being seen as whole instead of deficient. Maybe they were both risks worth taking. For 3 weeks, it worked. Seontae flew between Seoul and Lisbon with a frequency that made Jiwoo ask pointed questions about priorities, and Zora rebuilt her lighting system with deuteranopia-friendly design as the core principle. They met in cafes, walked through Alfama, had working dinners where Zora sketched photometric plans and Seontae calculated scalability logistics. They didn't call it dating. They called it collaboration. The gossip sites called it an affair. The photos multiplied, them leaving cafe routine, walking the pier at Quais de Sodre, sitting on steps with takeout containers. The captions got creative. Korean shipping airs Lisbon distraction. Slumming billionaire or genuine romance. Who is the mystery designer? Zora's email inbox filled with interview requests from lifestyle magazines and 3 different documentary filmmakers. Her professional website traffic increased 400%, which sounds good until you realize most visitors were just trying to figure out who she was, in relation to a man they'd already decided was more interesting. Teresa noticed the change. "You have that look," she said one afternoon while they installed a new sensor cluster. "What look?" "Like you're waiting for the other shoe to drop." Teresa handed her a screwdriver without being asked. The practiced choreography of people who'd worked together long enough to anticipate needs. "He's a good man. I see how he looks at you. But good men with too much money still break things accidentally." "I know," Zora said quietly. "Do you?" Teresa's weathered hand stilled on the wiring. "Because I see you building contingencies. Separate bank accounts for the project funding. Coffee dates but never dinner at his hotel. You're protecting yourself like you expect him to betray you. The last man I trusted turned my work into a gentrification brand and then ghosted when the community backlash started." Zora tightened a mounting bolt with more force than necessary. "So yes, I'm protecting myself. That's called learning from experience. It's also called not giving him a real chance," Teresa said, not unkindly. "I'm not saying trust blindly, but I am saying you can't build something real when you're always standing with one foot out the door." Before Zora could respond, her phone rang. Unknown. Seoul number. "Ms. Ellington?" A woman's voice, crisp Korean accented English, professional warmth that didn't reach through the phone line. "This is Han Ji-woo, Mr. Ryu's executive assistant. Do you have a moment?" Zora's stomach tightened. "Is Seontae okay?" "He's fine, but there's a situation that requires your attention." Ji-woo's pause was surgical. "You're aware of the media coverage regarding your relationship?" "The speculation, yes." Zora kept her voice neutral, aware that Teresa was listening. "Mr. Ryu's mother has become aware of that speculation. She's requesting a meeting." Requesting. The corporate euphemism for demanding. "Does Seontae know you're calling me?" "No," Ji-woo admitted. "He would tell you to refuse because he's trying to shield you from family pressure. But I've worked for him for 8 years, Ms. Ellington, and I know that avoiding his mother only makes the eventual confrontation worse. She will find a way to meet you. Better it happens on terms you can partially control." Zora appreciated the honesty, even as it made her want to throw her phone into the Tagus River. "What does she want?" "To assess whether you're genuine or an opportunist." Ji-woo's tone was carefully neutral. "She's been burned before by someone who used her son for social access. She's protective to the point of toxicity. And you're calling me because I think you're genuine," Ji-woo said quietly. "And because someone should warn you that Ryu Myung-ja doesn't fight fair. She'll investigate your finances, your past relationships, your family. She'll offer you money to leave him. If you refuse, she'll escalate to public pressure." "Why are you helping me?" "I'm helping him," Ji-woo corrected. "He's been alone so long he's forgotten what it looks like to need someone. You've reminded him. That's valuable. Worth protecting." Zora closed her eyes, feeling Teresa's worried gaze on her back. "When does she want to meet?" "She's in Lisbon. Tomorrow, 3 p.m., at the Palacio Hotel Terrace. She's made reservations under her name." Of course she was in Lisbon. Of course she'd flown 18 hours to ambush her son's not-quite-girlfriend in person. "Tell her I'll be there," Zora said, and ended the call before she could reconsider. Teresa was frowning. "That didn't sound good. His mother wants to meet me." Zora sat down on the cobblestones, suddenly exhausted. "To decide if I'm worthy of her billionaire son. And if she decides you're not? Then I guess we find out if Seontae chooses his inheritance or his lighting designer." The Palacio Terrace was aggressively beautiful in that way. Expensive hotels perfected, white tablecloths, silent servers, a view of the Tagus that felt like purchased serenity. Ryu Myung-ja sat with her back to the view, because she didn't need to look at scenery to prove she could afford it. She was smaller than Zora expected, barely 5'3". but she occupied space like someone who'd spent decades in rooms where her presence determined outcomes. Chanel suit, pearl brooch, hair in a severe bob that probably cost more to maintain than Zora's monthly rent. Her face was mask smooth, either excellent genetics or excellent surgeons, but her eyes were surgical in their assessment. Zora wore her best blazer, natural hair in a bun, minimal jewelry. She'd debated whether to dress up or down, then realized any choice would be read as strategy. So she chose authenticity, professional, but not apologetic. Ms. Ellington. Myungja didn't stand, didn't offer a hand. A server pulled out Zora's chair. Thank you for meeting me. As if I had a choice, Zora thought, but said, Mrs. Ryu. Tea? Without waiting for an answer, Myungja gestured to the server, who poured something pale and floral into delicate cups. I'll be direct. My son is brilliant at logistics and terrible at people. He mistakes intensity for intimacy. Every few years, someone catches his attention, usually someone altruistic, doing important work, and he convinces himself it's connection when it's actually fascination with novelty. Zora sipped tea she didn't want, using the pause to control her response. You think I'm a novelty? I think you're the first black woman he's dated publicly, which adds exotic appeal. Myungja said it with the casual racism of someone who considered it objective observation. I think your work is genuinely impressive, which makes you a more compelling distraction than the actresses and socialites who usually pursue him. And I think you're smart enough to recognize that association with him brings funding, visibility, and opportunities you couldn't access otherwise. You think I'm using him? Zora said flatly. I think you're human, and humans optimize for survival. Myungja set down her cup with a precise click against the saucer. So let me offer you a better survival strategy. 2 million euros, deposited in whatever account structure you prefer for tax optimization. In exchange, you end contact with my son, publicly and privately. The number hung in the air between them like smoke. 2 million euros, enough to fund Alfama's expansion across every low-income neighborhood in Lisbon. Enough to never worry about rent or project budgets, or whether her work would survive her next mistake. Enough to prove that Myungja had done exactly what Jiwoo warned, investigated Zora's finances thoroughly enough to know what number might be tempting. That's generous, Zora said carefully. It's strategic. You walk away now, before my son mistakes fascination for love, before media speculation becomes engagement rumors, before this becomes complicated legally and emotionally. Myungja pulled a fountain pen from her purse, expensive black lacquer with gold accents, and set it on the table next to a folded document. The contract is simple. Non-disclosure about the payment, permanent cessation of contact, standard penalty clauses if you violate terms. Zora looked at the pen. At the contract. At the woman who'd just tried to purchase her son's emotional life like it was a corporate acquisition. No, she said. Myungja's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. Surprise, maybe, or recalculation. You're refusing 2 million euros. I'm refusing to be bought. Zora pushed the contract back across the table without touching the pen. Your son is an adult. If you want him to stop seeing me, tell him yourself. Don't outsource your emotional manipulation to financial transactions. You think refusing makes you noble, Myungja said softly. But nobility doesn't pay for your mother's medical bills in Detroit, does it? Zora went very still. Excuse me? Rose Ellington, age 53, type 2 diabetes, recently hospitalized for complications, currently on payment plan for accumulated medical debt. Myungja recited it like reading a grocery list. You send her money monthly, not enough to clear the debt, but enough to keep collectors at bay. 2 million euros would solve that problem permanently. The violation was breathtaking. Zora felt her hands shake and forced them flat against her thighs where Myungja couldn't see. You investigated my mother's medical records. I investigated your financial obligations. Your mother's health is relevant context. No apology. No acknowledgement that she'd crossed every ethical line. "I'm not trying to hurt you, Ms. Ellington. I'm trying to prevent my son from being hurt when this inevitable fails. He's been lonely so long that he mistakes any genuine human connection for destiny." "Maybe," Zora said, surprised by how steady her voice was. "He's been lonely because his mother investigates everyone who gets close to him and offers them money to leave." For the first time, Myungja's mask cracked. Just a hairline fracture, but visible. His father had an affair with an artist 20 years younger. She pretended to love him, took photos in private moments, sold them to tabloids when he tried to end it quietly. The scandal almost destroyed our family's business. Seontae was 14. He watched his father publicly humiliated, watched our stock price crater, watched me clean up the mess while pretending our marriage wasn't bleeding out. Zora heard the pain beneath the control, but refused to let it excuse the violation. "I'm sorry that happened, but I'm not her. And your son is not your husband. He's exactly like his father," Myungja said quietly. "Brilliant, controlled, desperate for connection, but terrible at distinguishing genuine affection from performance. I won't watch him repeat that destruction." "Then trust him to make his own choices." Zora stood, leaving the tea untouched and the contract unsigned. "And if you ever investigate my family again, we're going to have a very different conversation." She walked away before Myungja could respond, before her hands stopped shaking, before the tears burning behind her eyes could fall where a hotel terrace full of strangers could see. She made it to the elevator, made it to the lobby, made it to the street before she had to stop and lean against a wall, breathing through the rage and violation and the terrible, dangerous thought. 2 million euros would save my mother. Her phone rang. Seontae. She almost didn't answer. But hiding from him felt like letting Myungja win. "Your mother just offered me 2 million euros to stop seeing you," Zora said without preamble. Silence. Then low and dangerous. "Where are you?" "Outside the Palacio. I left." "Stay there. I'm coming." Seontae. 10 minutes, please." He arrived in 8, emerging from a black car with his hair disheveled and his expression murderous. He scanned the street until he found her, then closed the distance in 4 long strides. "Are you okay?" His hands hovered near her shoulders, asking permission. "She investigated my mother's medical debt," Zora said, and heard her voice crack. "She knows exactly how much I'm struggling to help with hospital bills. She weaponized my mom's diabetes." Seontae went very still, and Zora watched him transform from concerned boyfriend to the ruthless executive who'd built a billion-dollar company from scratch. "What did you tell her?" "That she should talk to you herself if she wants you to stop seeing me. And that if she investigates my family again, we'll have problems." Something in his face softened. Pride, maybe, or relief. "You turned down 2 million euros. Did you think I wouldn't?" "No," he said immediately. "But I know how much your mother's medical bills weigh on you. That she used that. I'm so sorry." Zora finally let herself lean against him, just for a moment, feeling the solid warmth of someone who saw the violation for what it was. "She thinks I'm using you for money and opportunities. She thinks everyone is using me," Seontae said quietly. "It's how she survived my father's betrayal. By believing love is just well-disguised transaction." "Is it?" Zora pulled back to look at his face. "Is that what you think?" "I thought that until I met you." His hands settled carefully on her arms, an anchor without confinement. "You didn't want my money. You didn't want my name attached to your project. You wanted me to hold a generator in the rain and not ask stupid questions. No one's ever wanted just my presence before." Zora felt something dangerous crack open in her chest. The part she'd kept armored since James, since Detroit, since learning that men who said they wanted to help usually wanted to control. "I need to tell you something." "Okay. When your mother said 2 million would clear my mom's debt, there was half a second where I calculated if I could take the money and see you anyway." She forced herself to meet his eyes. "Half a second where I weighed my mom's health against whatever this is between us. That's not weakness," Seontae said. That's love for your mother. I didn't take it. I know. But the fact that I considered it makes you human, he interrupted gently. Zora, if someone offered me $2 million to solve a problem I cared about, I'd at least do the math. You considering it doesn't change anything except proving you're not the saint my mother thinks I'm too stupid to see through. She laughed, despite everything, a wet sound that might have been half sob. I hate that she made me doubt myself. She's good at that. Seontae's jaw tightened. I need to go talk to her, alone. It's going to be not pretty. What are you going to say? That if she ever investigates someone I care about again, I'll liquidate every asset she has control over and donate it to lighting designers working in underserved communities. He said it with perfect calm, like discussing shipping routes. And that she can either accept you or lose me, but she doesn't get to buy you off like you're a corporate problem. Zora studied his face. The determination there, the protective fury that felt both comforting and terrifying. Don't blow up your family for me. That's not... We've known each other 5 weeks. 6, he corrected. And my family is one person who thinks wealth entitles her to control everyone around her. I've been letting her do it because it was easier than fighting. But you showed up and refused 2 million euros because you won't be reduced to a transaction. That's worth fighting for. He kissed her forehead, quick, gentle, asking nothing, and headed back into the hotel. Zora stood on the Lisbon sidewalk, still shaking, and called Maya. His mother tried to buy me off, she said when Maya answered. Fucking hell. How much? 2 million. Maya was quiet for 3 seconds. And you're still in Lisbon instead of on a plane to Detroit with a massive check? I'm still in Lisbon, Zora confirmed. Okay, so you're serious about him. I think I am, Zora said, and felt the truth of it settle like weight. Which is terrifying because his mother is going to make my life hell. The media already treats me like an exotic curiosity, and I still haven't figured out how to be in a relationship without waiting for betrayal. But he researched how not to be controlling. He told his assistant I was worth protecting, and when I admitted I thought about taking his mother's money for half a second, he didn't flinch. Maya sighed. You're going to do this, aren't you? Fall for the emotionally intelligent billionaire with the nightmare family? Looks like it, Zora said. Then I'm booking a flight to Lisbon, Maya decided. Someone needs to vet this man in person and make sure he's as genuine as he seems. Plus, I want to meet the mother who thinks she can buy people. You don't have to. Yes, I do. That's what family does. Maya's voice softened. Your mom's medical bills, Zora. Are they really that bad? Bad enough that 2 million euros would change her life. Zora closed her eyes. But not bad enough to sell my integrity. Or him. Good, Maya said fiercely. Because you're worth more than 2 million euros. You're worth someone who flies 18 hours for coffee and argues with his mother for your honor. After they hung up, Zora walked back to Alfama, to the community patio where the first prototype still glowed with adaptive amber light. Teresa was there, watering plants in the fading twilight. How did it go with the mother? Teresa asked. She offered me money to leave him. I said no. He's currently up there threatening to disown himself if she ever pulls something like that again. Teresa set down her watering can and studied Zora with the assessing gaze of someone who'd raised children and buried a daughter and learned to read people's true intentions. Do you love him? I don't know, Zora admitted, but I think I could, and that's terrifying. Love is always terrifying, Teresa said, especially when it's real. The fake stuff is easy. You can control it, predict it, walk away clean. Real love makes you vulnerable, makes you choose someone's humanity over your own comfort. His mother thinks I'm using him. His mother is protecting herself from her own past. Teresa handed Zora the watering can. But you're not responsible for healing her trauma. You're only responsible for showing up honestly with her son. If she can't see that, it's her blindness, not your failure. Zora watered the plants in silence, letting Teresa's words settle. When she checked her phone an hour later, there were 3 messages from Seontae. Seontae. I told her. She's furious. Seontae. But she knows I meant it. No more investigations. No more buyout offers. Seontae. Can I see you tomorrow? I need to see your face and remember why I just burned bridges with my only living family. Zora typed and deleted 4 responses before settling on. Zora. Tomorrow. 7 p.m. My studio. We need to talk about what happens next. Because if they were doing this, really doing this, they needed to name it clearly. No more calling it collaboration when it was a relationship. No more pretending the stakes weren't enormous. His response came immediately. Seontae. I'll be there. And Zora? Thank you for saying no. Not for me. For you. You deserve to make that choice on your terms. She stared at the message, at the consideration embedded in every word, and felt her last defenses cracking. Falling for Ryu Seontae wasn't safe. It wasn't simple. It was going to involve hostile mothers and invasive media, and navigating wealth gaps that looked like chasms. But maybe Teresa was right. Maybe real love was supposed to be terrifying. Maybe vulnerability was the whole point. James Whitmore appeared in Lisbon on a Tuesday with perfect timing and terrible intentions. Zora was in her studio reviewing photometric data when Maya texted, Maya, tall white guy with venture capitalist energy, just asked a barista where to find you. Claims to be an old colleague. Should I be worried? Zora's stomach dropped. She knew exactly one tall white guy with venture capitalist energy who'd call himself a colleague instead of what he actually was. The ex-boyfriend who'd turned her Detroit project into a cautionary tale about good intentions and gentrification. Zora. Name? Maya. James something. Looks like he buys artisanal coffee and talks about disruption, unironically. Zora. Don't tell him where I am. Maya. Too late. He saw your name on my phone screen when you texted. I'm sorry. Zora closed her laptop, suddenly exhausted by the universe's sense of dramatic timing. Of course, James showed up now, right after she'd turned down 2 million euros and started something real with Seontae. Of course, the past returned exactly when she was trying to build a different future. He knocked 15 minutes later. Polite, rhythmic, the knock of someone who expected doors to open. Zora considered not answering, but James was persistent when he wanted something, and making him wait only delayed the inevitable. She opened the door. He looked exactly the same. Expensive casual wear, artfully disheveled hair, the smile of someone who thought charm could compensate for damage. Zora. He said her name like they were old friends instead of 2 people who'd stopped speaking after his urban renewal initiative displaced 30 families. You look amazing. What do you want, James? No warmth, no invitation inside. His smile dimmed half a watt. I heard about your Alfama project. Adaptive lighting systems, inclusive design principles, community integration. It's exactly what we tried to do in Detroit. We didn't try to do anything in Detroit. Zora corrected coldly. I designed a lighting system for public safety. You turned it into marketing material for luxury condos and blamed me when residents protested. That's why I'm here. He pulled out his phone, pulled up what looked like architectural renderings. I want to make it right. New project, fully community controlled. Your name leading the design. I've secured funding. No. You haven't even looked at the proposal. I don't need to. Zora kept her hand on the door, ready to close it. You taught me that pretty proposals don't mean anything when the person presenting them can't be trusted. James had the grace to flinch. I know I messed up. The Detroit thing got away from me. Investors pushed for faster returns. City officials wanted flashier outcomes. And I let the mission drift. But I learned. This time it's different. How much? What? How much funding? Zora crossed her arms. Because if it's enough to be tempting, that means it comes with strings. And I'm done with strings. 3 million euros, James said. No creative interference clause. You'd have full control over design, implementation, and community partnership structure. 3 million. More than Myongja's buyout offer. More than Zora had ever had access to. Enough to expand Alfama's lighting network across every neighborhood in Lisbon, maybe Porto, maybe beyond. Who's funding it? She asked, already knowing the answer would be complicated. Consortium of impact investors. Tech executives who want to diversify portfolios with social good branding. James said it like that was supposed to sound reassuring. They're looking for projects that combine innovation with optics. Optics, Zora repeated. You mean they want to look good doing the bare minimum? They want to fund genuine improvement that also happens to be good PR, James corrected. Is that so terrible? Yes, Zora wanted to say. Yes, because I've seen what happens when good PR becomes more important than good work. I've watched you prioritize photo opportunities over community trust. I've learned that impact investors means people who want credit for solving problems without addressing why those problems exist. But she also thought about her mother's medical bills, about Teresa's scar from falling in the dark, about all the neighborhoods that needed light and safety and dignity, but couldn't afford designers who insisted on creative autonomy. I need to think about it, she said finally. James's smile returned, brighter. Of course, take your time. I'm in Lisbon through Friday. He handed her a business card. New company, same promises. Just don't take too long. The investors are considering other projects. The artificial scarcity tactic. Zora recognized it, resented it, and hated that it still worked on the anxious part of her brain that never forgot what it felt like to be broke. I'll call you, she said, and closed the door before he could push further. She stood in her studio, staring at the business card, and felt the weight of choices she didn't want to make. 3 million euros. Full creative control, supposedly. A chance to prove that Detroit had been James's failure, not hers. Or another beautifully wrapped trap. Her phone buzzed. Seontai. Seontai. Still coming over tonight? She'd almost forgotten. Their talk about what happens next, about naming this relationship clearly instead of hiding behind professional collaboration. Zora. Yes, but I need to tell you something when I get there. Seontae. Should I be worried? Zora. My ex showed up with a funding offer for the Alfama expansion. 3 million euros, no strings attached supposedly. The typing indicator appeared, disappeared, appeared again. When his response came, it was careful. Seontae. How are you feeling about it? Not, you should take it, or you shouldn't trust him, or I can give you more money. Just, how are you feeling? Zora felt something warm and dangerous expand in her chest. Zora. Conflicted, suspicious, tempted, all of the above. Seontae. Then let's talk through it together. No pressure, just thinking out loud. She arrived at his hotel suite at 7:03 p.m., carrying takeout from Teresa's favorite restaurant and the business card that felt radioactive in her pocket. Seontae opened the door in jeans and a t-shirt, the most casual she'd ever seen him, and stepped aside to let her in without crowding her space. His suite was surprisingly cluttered, laptop open with spreadsheets, papers covered in his neat handwriting, a whiteboard on the wall covered in logistics flowcharts. It looked like a workspace, not a hotel room. Like he actually lived here instead of just sleeping between flights. You've been here 3 weeks and you turned it into an office, Zora observed. I work better when I can see all the variables at once. He took the takeout containers, started unpacking them on the coffee table. And I've been consulting with urban planning experts about lighting system scalability. Thought I might have useful data for your expansion plans. Of course he had. Because Seontae's love language was apparently research and logistical optimization. They sat on the floor with food between them. Bacalao, potatoes, greens, and Zora told him everything. James showing up, the 3 million euro offer, the consortium of impact investors who wanted social good with profitable optics. her suspicion that no strings attached was a beautiful lie. Seontae listened without interrupting, his face carefully neutral in that way that meant he was processing hard. "What does your gut say?" he asked when she finished. "That James burned me once and I'd be an idiot to trust him again." But 3 million euros would change everything, Zora admitted. "I could hire a team, expand beyond Alfama, create templates for replication in other cities. I could build something sustainable instead of scraping by project to project." "Those are good reasons," Seontae said carefully. "You're not going to tell me not to take it?" "It's not my decision." He met her eyes. "But I will say, every time you've described James, you've talked about how he prioritized image over impact. And this offer, 3 million from investors who want good PR, sounds like the same pattern with a bigger budget." Zora set down her fork, appetite gone. "You think I shouldn't take it? I think you should ask what creative control actually means when your funder's primary goal is optics." He hesitated, then, "Can I show you something?" He pulled up his laptop, opened a spreadsheet that made Zora's eyes cross. "When I built Handbit, I had 3 major funding offers. 2 were from venture capital firms that wanted fast growth and flashy metrics. 1 was from a smaller institutional investor that wanted sustainable expansion, even if it meant slower returns. I took the small investor." "Why?" "Because when I asked about decision-making authority, the VC firms had 14-page contracts about board oversight and performance benchmarks. The institutional investor had a 2-page agreement about quarterly reporting and mission alignment. The paperwork told me who actually believed in autonomy versus who wanted control disguised as partnership." Zora felt something click into place. "You're saying I should look at James's contract terms." "I'm saying that people who genuinely respect your autonomy don't need complex legal structures to prove it. They just step back and let you work." Like he'd done, Zora realized. Anonymous donation, no branding requirements, no pressure for acknowledgement. He'd funded her work, and then shown up to help with generators in the rain. Not because he wanted credit, but because the work mattered. "What if the contract is clean?" she asked. "Then maybe he's changed." Seontae's expression was carefully neutral. "People do change, sometimes. But you don't think he has." "I think," Seontae said slowly, "that men who've built careers on using other people's creativity for their own advancement rarely wake up one day and decide to be selfless. But I also think I'm biased because I'm falling for you, and I don't trust your ex's motivations." The room went very quiet. "You're falling for me," Zora repeated. Seontae looked at her with painful honesty. "Yes. Which is why you shouldn't weight my opinion too heavily on this. I want you to have the resources you need. I also want James Whitmore on a different continent where he can't hurt you again. Those desires are in conflict." Zora's heart was doing complicated things in her chest. "This is the conversation we were supposed to have. About what happens next. About naming this." "Yes." "So name it," she said. "What is this?" Seontae set down his laptop, gave her his full attention in that intense way that made her feel like the only person in the world. "I'm falling in love with you. I know it's too soon. I know we have impossible complications. I know my mother is a nightmare and the media won't leave us alone, and there are wealth dynamics we haven't figured out how to navigate. But when I'm with you, I remember what it feels like to be seen as a whole person instead of a bank account. You make me want to be better than my worst instincts. And I hope, I make you feel safe enough to risk vulnerability even after everything that's taught you not to." Zora felt tears burn behind her eyes. "I don't know if I'm falling in love with you yet, but I know I trust you more than I've trusted anyone in years. I know when your mother tried to buy me off, my first thought was how angry you'd be on my behalf. And I know that when James showed up with his perfect offer, I wanted to talk to you about it before I even considered the details." "That's enough," Seontae said quietly. "That's more than enough for now." They sat in silence, the food cooling between them. And Zora felt something fundamental shift. This was real. Messy and complicated, and real. Not a collaboration or a friendship with potential, or whatever euphemism she'd been using to protect herself. This was her falling in love with a Korean billionaire who saw her color blindness as innovation instead of limitation, who researched relationship dynamics to avoid being controlling, who'd threatened to disown himself to protect her dignity. "I need to see James's contract," she said finally. "And I need you to look at it with me. Not to decide for me, just to help me see the traps I might miss because I want the money to work." "I can do that," Seontae said. "And I need you to promise that if I take his offer and it blows up in my face, you won't say, 'I told you so.' I promise. Even though you'll be thinking it." "I'll think it very quietly," he agreed, and she laughed despite everything. They finished dinner talking about logistics, how to request contract terms without signaling suspicion, what red flags to look for in funding agreements, contingency plans if James's offer was exactly as predatory as they both suspected. It was the least romantic date Zora had ever had. It was also the most intimate, because Seontae treated her professional crisis like it mattered as much as their personal relationship, because he offered expertise without demanding authority, because he made space for her to be uncertain without rushing her toward resolution. When she left at midnight, he walked her to the door and kissed her forehead again. Gentle, patient, asking nothing. "You'll figure it out," he said. "You're the smartest person I know." Zora walked back to her apartment through Lisbon's late-night streets, past her own lighting installations glowing amber, and felt the weight of decisions she still had to make. But for the first time in years, she didn't feel alone in making them. James sent the contract the next morning with a subject line that made Zora's teeth hurt. "Partnership for Radical Change." 3 exclamation points, the grammatical equivalent of overselling. She forwarded it to Seontae without opening it, with a single line, "Help me see what I'm missing." His response came in 20 minutes. "Seontae, reviewed. Can you come to my suite? This needs to be a voice conversation." That didn't sound promising. She found him at his whiteboard, the contract printed and sections highlighted in different colors. He'd color-coded it, then presumably realized she'd need labels since he couldn't reliably distinguish his own system, so each section had sticky notes. Green Satur standard, yellow Satur's concerning, red Satur's deal breaker. There was a lot of yellow. 2 red sections. "Show me," Zora said, setting down her bag. Seontae pointed to the first red sticky note. Section 7, Clause C. Designer agrees that all public-facing communications about the project, including but not limited to media interviews, social media posts, and conference presentations, will be coordinated through the consortium's communications team to ensure brand alignment. Zora read it 3 times. "That's vague." "That's control," Seontae corrected. "Brand alignment means they get to approve everything you say publicly. If you want to criticize an aspect of the project, discuss challenges, or name problems with their approach, they can veto it. But it says coordinated, not approved. Legal language is deliberate." He pulled up his laptop, showed her a contract law reference. Coordinated through means routed through for approval. It's softer language for the same restriction. Zora felt her stomach sink. What's the second red flag? Section 12, Clause F. In the event of public controversy or negative media coverage related to the project, consortium reserves the right to assume primary decision-making authority for crisis management, including but not limited to personnel changes, design modifications, and community engagement strategies. The words rearranged themselves in Zora's brain into a nightmare scenario. If the project faced backlash, which community-based work always did when navigating gentrification concerns, James's investors could fire her, redesign her work, and control community relationships. "Personnel changes," she repeated. "They could remove me from my own project." "Yes." Seontae's voice was gentle but firm. "This contract gives you creative control right up until the moment they decide you're a liability. Then they own everything." Zora sat down on his couch, feeling the weight of 3 million euros evaporate into recognition of trap. He knew I'd be desperate enough not to read carefully. Or he's betting that you'd be so grateful for the funding you'd accept terms you'd normally refuse. Seontae sat beside her, careful not to crowd. I'm sorry. I know you wanted this to be legitimate. I wanted to believe people could change, Zora said quietly. I wanted to believe James learned something from Detroit. Maybe he did. Maybe he learned to hide the control better. She looked at the contract, at the yellow and red sections, at the beautiful 3 million euro lie. I have to say no. Yes. Even though it means staying small. Even though it means turning down resources that could help people. Even though, Seontae agreed. Because accepting this doesn't help people. It helps James Whitmore and his impact investors build portfolios on your credibility. You'd be the face of their project until you weren't useful anymore. Then they'd erase you and keep the work. Zora knew he was right. She also knew that saying no to 3 million euros, right after saying no to Myongja's 2 million, was going to make her look either incredibly principled or incredibly stupid. Your mother is going to think I'm using you, she said. I turned down her money, but I'm accepting yours for the project. The optics are terrible. The optics, Seontae said carefully, assume that all money is the same. But my donation came with no control clause, no communication approval, no crisis takeover provision. The terms matter more than the amount. Try explaining that to gossip sites. I don't care about gossip sites. He turned to face her fully. Zora, if you want to accept James's offer because you genuinely believe it's the best path forward, I'll support that. I won't agree with it, but I'll support your choice. But if you're considering it because you think refusing makes you dependent on me, or because you're worried about perception, those are bad reasons to accept a bad contract. She studied his face, looking for signs of manipulation or hidden agenda. Found only honest concern and the kind of patience that came from actually respecting someone's autonomy. I'm saying no, she decided. I'm telling James that his contract terms are unacceptable, and I won't be part of another project where he uses my work for his reputation. Do you want me there when you tell him? No. Zora stood, feeling steadier. This is my mess to clean up, but thank you for reading the contract, for not saying, I told you so, even though you were right. I'm not right, Seontae said. You're right. You saw the trap. You're choosing differently. I just helped translate the legal language. Zora kissed him then, quick, grateful, real. You did more than that, but I'll let you believe you just translated. She called James from her studio, putting him on speaker so Maya, who'd insisted on being present, could witness. Zora? James sounded pleased, expectant. Did you review the contract? I think you'll find the terms are incredibly generous. Section 7. Clause C gives your investors approval over all my public communications, Zora interrupted. Section 12. Clause F lets them remove me from the project if there's negative media coverage. Those aren't generous terms. Those are control mechanisms. Silence. Then, those are standard protective clauses. We're investing 3 million euros. We need some oversight. You need ownership, Zora corrected. And I'm not interested in being the face of your project until I become inconvenient. So I'm declining. You're turning down 3 million euros because of standard contract language. James's voice sharpened with frustrated disbelief. Do you know how many designers would kill for this opportunity? Then offer it to them, Zora said. I'm sure you'll find someone willing to trade their autonomy for funding. But it won't be me. Not again. This is about Detroit, James said, like he'd just figured out the answer to a difficult problem. You're still angry about a project that ended 3 years ago. I'm not angry, Zora said, surprised to find it true. I'm just done letting you use my work to make yourself look better. Good luck with your impact investors, James. I hope you find a designer who doesn't read contracts carefully. She ended the call before he could respond. Maya was grinning. That was the most professionally brutal conversation I've ever witnessed. I've been practicing boundaries, Zora said. Turns out they get easier with repetition. Her phone buzzed immediately. Unknown number. Unknown. This is Han Ji-woo. Seontae told me you might need crisis PR support if your ex tries to spin this badly. I have contacts at 3 major outlets. Say the word, and I'll make sure the narrative stays accurate. Zora stared at the message, at the offer of protection she hadn't asked for but desperately needed. Zora, thank you. I'll let you know if James tries anything. Ji-woo. Also, you're good for him. He's less robotic when he talks about you. That's valuable. Ji-woo. Don't tell him I said that. Zora smiled despite everything. Zora, your secret is safe. She looked at Maya, at her studio full of half-finished designs, at the Alfama prototype schematics on her wall. I just turned down 5 million euros in 1 week. Because both offers came with strings attached to your throat, Maya pointed out. That's not refusing money. That's refusing strangulation. Seontae's money came with strings too, Zora said quietly. They're just the kind I can live with. Because his strings are, please do good work, instead of, let me control your narrative, Maya said. There's a difference. His mother doesn't think so. His mother is projecting her own trauma onto every woman who gets close to her son. Maya stood, stretched. But that's her problem to fix, not yours. Zora hoped that was true. But she couldn't shake the feeling that Ryu Myung-ja wasn't done trying to separate them, and that the next attempt would be more sophisticated than a simple buyout offer. The summons came 2 weeks later. Seontae needed to return to Seoul for an emergency board meeting. Kang Min-jae, his corporate rival, had filed a motion questioning his capacity for leadership based on undisclosed medical conditions and personal distractions. Deuteranopia and Zora, weaponized as corporate ammunition. I have to go, Seontae told her over coffee, his face drawn with exhaustion. If I don't show up and defend myself, Kang can push through a hostile board restructure. I could lose controlling interest in my own company. How long? Zora asked. Week, maybe 2. Depends on how ugly it gets. And your mother? We'll use this as proof that I'm distracted by our relationship. He said it flatly, without drama. She'll frame it as, if he can't manage his personal life without corporate consequences, he's not fit for leadership. Zora felt the trap closing. If you choose me, you lose your company. No, Seontae said firmly. If Kang succeeds in his power play, I lose my company. You're not the cause. You're the excuse he's using. That's a semantic distinction. It's an important one. He reached across the table, took her hand. I'm not choosing between you and my company. I'm fighting to keep both. But I need you to know, if it comes down to a choice, I'm choosing you. Don't, Zora said, pulling her hand back. Don't make me responsible for you losing everything you've built. You're not responsible. Kang is responsible. My mother is responsible for feeding him ammunition. The corporate culture that treats colorblindness as weakness is responsible. His voice was steady but intense. You're the first good thing in my life that has nothing to do with obligation or image. I'm not sacrificing that for a company that thinks my deuteranopia makes me incompetent. Zora wanted to argue, wanted to tell him he was being reckless, that companies were tangible and relationships were risks, that she wasn't worth blowing up his career. But she'd heard the exhaustion in his voice when he talked about board meetings, had seen him come alive when discussing lighting design and community impact, had watched him choose honesty over image control again and again. Go to Seoul, she said finally. Fight for your company, win this battle, and then we'll figure out what comes next. Come with me, Seontae said suddenly. What? Come to Seoul. Let me introduce you properly. Not as a scandal, as a partner. Let the board see that you're not a distraction. You're someone who makes me better at strategic thinking. He leaned forward, urgent. Kang is using you as a weapon, because he's betting I'll hide you. If you show up instead, if you're transparent and impressive and completely yourself, it disarms his whole strategy. Zora's heart was pounding. You want me to meet your corporate board and your mother simultaneously? I want them to see what I see, Seontae said. Someone brilliant, principled, who builds systems that matter. Someone worth defending. It was either the best idea or the worst idea Zora had ever heard. Flying to Seoul, walking into the lion's den of Korean corporate culture, and Myongja's disapproval, letting herself be visible in exactly the context that made her most vulnerable. I need to think about it, she said. Of course. He stood, left money for coffee. I'm flying out tomorrow night. If you decide to come, let Jiwoo know. She'll handle logistics. If you decide to stay, I'll understand. He kissed her forehead and left before she could say anything else. Zora sat in the cafe, staring at her untouched coffee, and called the one person whose opinion she trusted without reservation. Mom, she said when Rose Ellington answered. I need advice. Is he worth it? Her mother asked immediately, because Rose had raised Zora alone after her father left and developed the superpower of cutting through complications to essential truths. I think so, but I'm terrified. Good, Rose said. If you weren't terrified, I'd worry you weren't paying attention. Love is always terrifying when it's real. His mother hates me. His company is attacking him for being with me. The media treats me like an exotic curiosity. And he wants me to fly to Seoul and walk into all of that publicly. So don't go, Rose said simply. What? If it's too much, say no. Real love means you get to have boundaries. If he can't respect that, he's not who you think he is. Zora felt something unclench in her chest. You're saying I should stay in Lisbon. I'm saying you should do what feels right for you, not what you think he needs. Rose paused. But baby, I'll also say this. Running from hard things is how you miss the important ones. And from everything you've told me, this man sounds important. He threatened to disown himself when his mother tried to buy me off. Then he's serious, Rose said. Question is, are you? Was she? Zora sat with the question, let it settle. Was she serious enough about Ryu Seontae to walk into his messy, complicated life and let herself be seen in contexts that terrified her? She thought about him holding her acrylic tube in the rain, about him researching how not to be controlling, about him reading James's contract and helping her see the traps without making decisions for her. She thought about his face when she'd called his deuteranopia an advantage, the shock of being seen as whole instead of broken. I'm serious, she told her mother. I'm terrified and serious. Then go to Seoul, Rose said. Show them who you are, and if they can't handle it, that's their failure, not yours. Zora called Jiwoo an hour later. I'm coming to Seoul, she said, but I need you to be honest. Is this going to make things worse for him? Truthfully? Jiwoo was quiet for a moment. It could go either way. If the board sees you as a distraction, it confirms Kang's narrative. If they see you as a partner who enhances Seontae's strategic thinking, it disarms the attack. So everything depends on my performance. Everything depends on whether you show up as yourself, Jiwoo corrected. Seontae doesn't need you to perform. He needs you to be genuine. That's what disarms people. They're expecting calculation, and you give them honesty. What if my honesty isn't impressive enough? Then they're the wrong audience, Jiwoo said firmly. I'll send you flight details. Business class, arriving 2 days before the board meeting so you're not jet-lagged. And Zora? I'm glad you're coming. He needs someone in his corner who isn't on his payroll. The flight was 17 hours of Zora second-guessing every decision. She reviewed her presentation on inclusive lighting design, then deleted it and started over. She researched Korean business etiquette, learned when to bow and how deeply, practiced honorific phrases that felt clumsy in her mouth. Maya had helped her pack, insisting on the good blazer and the necklace Zora's grandmother had given her, armor disguised as accessories. Seontae met her at Incheon Airport at 6 a.m., looking exhausted and relieved in equal measure. He didn't hug her, too public, too many cameras. But his eyes said everything his hands couldn't. "You came," he said quietly. "I'm terrified," she admitted. "Me too." He took her carry-on bag. "But we're terrified together. That's better than being terrified alone." They drove into Seoul through morning traffic, the city unfolding in glass towers and mountains and complexity. Zora couldn't quite process through jet lag. Seontae pointed out landmarks with the careful attention of someone trying to share his world. The Han River, Namsan Tower, the Gangnam district where his office occupied 12 floors of a building that looked like a glass sculpture. "The board meeting is tomorrow at 2 p.m., he said, as they pulled into his building's underground parking. "Kang will present his motion first, then I respond. Then you, if you're willing, present on how inclusive design principles apply to logistics optimization." Zora's stomach dropped. "You want me to present to your board?" "I want them to see what you do," Seontae said. "Not as a girlfriend, as a professional whose work informs strategic thinking. Kang's argument is that I'm distracted. You presenting proves that my distraction is actually expanded capacity for systems thinking." It was brilliant strategy. It was also terrifying. "What if I mess up?" "Then you mess up," Seontae said simply. "But you won't. You're the person who redesigned an entire lighting system in 3 weeks to accommodate colorblindness. You're the person who turned down 5 million euros rather than compromise your principles. You're capable of anything." His belief in her was almost harder to bear than doubt would have been. They spent the day in his office, Zora refining her presentation while Seontae fielded increasingly hostile emails from board members who'd apparently decided she was a gold digger before meeting her. Jiwoo brought them food and periodic updates on corporate gossip, her face carefully neutral when she reported that Myungja had scheduled a family dinner for that evening. "She wants to intimidate you before the board meeting," Jiwoo said bluntly. "Show you that you don't belong in this world." "Should I go?" Zora asked Seontae. He looked torn. "I want to say no. But if you don't go, she'll use it as evidence that you're afraid of scrutiny. And if you do go, she'll make it as uncomfortable as possible. So I'm damned either way." "Yes," he admitted. "I'm sorry." Zora thought about Rose's advice. "Show them who you are." "I'll go. But you're coming with me." "She won't like that." "I don't care what she likes," Zora said. "This is a partnership or it's nothing. I'm not walking into her ambush alone so she can tell you later that I failed some test." Something in Seontae's expression shifted. Pride, maybe, or relief that she was fighting instead of fleeing. "Okay," he said. "We go together." Ryu Myungja's house was in Pyeongchangdong, where old money lived behind walls and gardens that cost more to maintain than most people's mortgages. The house itself was traditional Korean architecture, updated with modern luxury. Curved tile roofs, wooden beams, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a koi pond. Zora wore her good blazer and her grandmother's necklace, and the carefully neutral expression she'd perfected for hostile city council meetings. Seontae wore a suit and the tense shoulders of someone preparing for battle. Myungja greeted them at the entrance in a silk handbook that probably cost more than Zora's entire wardrobe, her face a mask of polite hostility. "Ms. Ellington, how kind of you to accept my invitation." As if I had a choice, Zora thought, but said, "Thank you for having me, Mrs. Rao." The formal dining room was intimidating in its perfection. Low table, silk cushions, place settings that involved more utensils than Zora knew names for. Myungja had invited 2 other guests, both older Korean women who looked at Zora with the barely concealed curiosity of people examining an exotic specimen. "Mrs. Park, Mrs. Choi, this is my son's friend," Myungja said, the pause before friend loaded with skepticism. "Zora Ellington, from America." The dinner was exquisitely uncomfortable. Mrs. Park asked where Zora went to university, then made a small noise when the answer was a state school instead of an Ivy. Mrs. Choi asked about her family, then expressed polite surprise that Zora's mother was a single parent. Every question was a test. Every answer was weighed and found wanting. Seontae sat rigid beside her, his hand occasionally finding hers under the table. Brief touches that felt like lifelines. "So, Ms. Ellington," Myungja said over beautifully arranged bibimbap, "I understand you design lighting for slums." "I design adaptive lighting systems for underserved communities," Zora corrected carefully. "Neighborhoods that municipal governments underfund, which creates safety issues that disproportionately affect elderly residents and women." "How noble," Mrs. Park said in a tone that meant the opposite. "And your compensation for this work?" The trap was obvious. Say she charged market rates and she was exploiting poor communities. Say she worked for reduced fees and she was admitting financial instability. "I use a sliding scale based on community resources," Zora said. "Some neighborhoods pay full rate, which subsidizes below-market work elsewhere. It's a sustainable model that doesn't require perpetual philanthropic funding." "Except when it does," Myungja said softly. "I understand my son has donated to your Lisbon project. Anonymously, initially, but now quite publicly given the media coverage." "He donated before we met," Zora said, meeting her eyes. "And the terms specified no creative control, no publicity requirements, no involvement beyond financial support. That's not buying influence. That's supporting work that aligns with his values." "And what exactly are his values?" Mrs. Choi asked with pointed interest. Zora looked at Seontae, who gave her a small nod, permission to speak for him. "He believes that systems should serve everyone, not just people who already have advantages," she said. "That color blindness isn't a deficit. It's a different way of seeing that reveals oversights in supposedly normal design. That money is a tool for creating impact, not a mechanism for controlling people. And that love requires respecting autonomy even when protection feels safer." The table went very quiet. "Love," Myungja repeated, her voice sharp as broken glass. "You've known my son for 2 months. That's not love. That's infatuation. With respect, Mrs. Ryu, you don't get to define what I feel," Zora said, and felt Seontae's hand tighten on hers under the table. "I spent years learning to protect myself from men who used money as manipulation. Your son is the first person who respected my boundaries even when violating them would have been easier. That's not infatuation. That's recognizing someone whose values align with mine." "Values," Mrs. Park murmured. "Such an American concept. In Korea, we prioritize family harmony over individual feelings. Family harmony that requires someone to disappear isn't harmony," Zora said. "It's control disguised as tradition." Myungja set down her chopsticks with precise force. "You presume to lecture me about Korean culture?" "I'm not lecturing about culture," Zora said, keeping her voice steady. "I'm stating that conditional love that requires people to hide parts of themselves to be acceptable, isn't actually love. It's performance review." Seontae made a small sound that might have been a suppressed laugh. "Seontae," Myungja said coldly, "do you find this amusing? Your girlfriend insults our cultural values in our home?" "She's not insulting our culture," Seontae interrupted, and Zora heard the steel in his voice. "She's calling out the specific ways you've weaponized cultural expectations to control me. There's a difference." The room temperature dropped 10 degrees. "I see," Myungja said quietly. "You've decided that a woman you've known for weeks understands you better than the mother who raised you." "No," Seontae said. "I've decided that understanding someone doesn't entitle you to own them. You raised me. I'm grateful. But I'm also 32 years old, and I get to choose who I love without requiring your approval." Mrs. Choi and Mrs. Park looked deeply uncomfortable, clearly wishing they were anywhere else. "If you continue this relationship," Myungja said, her voice trembling with controlled fury, "I will remove you from your father's trust fund. You will inherit nothing. Is she worth that?" Zora felt her heart stop. This was the nuclear option. The choice Seontae had known might be coming. Seontae didn't hesitate. "Yes, you'll regret this," Myungja said. "Maybe," Seontae agreed. but I'll regret it as myself, not as the person you need me to be. He stood, helped Zora to her feet. Thank you for dinner, Mother. We're leaving. They walked out together, Myongja's furious silence following them like a curse. In the car, Zora's hands were shaking. You just gave up your inheritance. I gave up money I never needed, Seontae corrected. I built my own company. I don't need my father's trust fund. But your mother will either come around or won't, he said quietly. But I'm done letting her trauma control my life. And I'm done pretending that protecting her feelings is more important than living honestly. Zora felt tears burn behind her eyes. I never wanted you to lose your family. I didn't lose my family, Seontae said, pulling over to the side of the road so he could look at her properly. I lost access to money I didn't need, and the approval of someone who was never going to give it unconditionally. But I still have Jiwoo, who's more family than employee. I still have Teresa in Lisbon, who feeds us and protects your work. And I have you. If you'll still have me after all this mess. Of course I'll have you, Zora said, and kissed him like the world wasn't falling apart around them. When they pulled apart, Seontae's phone was buzzing with messages. Jiwoo. Your mother just called every board member to report that you're unstable and should be removed from leadership immediately. Jiwoo. Kang is using it. Emergency session moved up to tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. Jiwoo. I'm sorry, but you need to be ready. Seontae showed Zora the messages. She's escalating. Then we escalate back, Zora said, surprised by the steadiness in her own voice. Tomorrow morning I present first. Before Kang, before your mother's narrative takes root, I show them exactly what inclusive design thinking looks like, and how it applies to your company's logistics optimization. And then you show them that loving someone doesn't make you weak, it makes you human. That's risky, Seontae said. Everything about us is risky, Zora pointed out. Might as well be risky together. They spent the night in his apartment preparing, Zora refining her presentation until every slide told a clear story. How designing for edge cases improves systems for everyone. How deuteranopia reveals oversights in color-dependent design. How diversity of perspective creates innovation. At 3 a.m., exhausted and terrified, they fell asleep on his couch with presentation notes scattered around them like protection spells. At 8 a.m., they walked into Hanbit Maritime's boardroom together. Kang Min-jae was already there, looking smug. The board members looked skeptical. Myongja sat in the back row, her face an unreadable mask. And Zora Ellington, a Black American lighting designer who'd spent her life being underestimated, stepped up to the front of the room and began to speak. Good morning, Zora said, her voice steady despite the 20 pairs of eyes assessing her like she was a quarterly earnings report. My name is Zora Ellington, and I'm here to talk about why your CEO's medical condition and personal distraction are actually your company's competitive advantages. Kang Min-jae shifted uncomfortably. Several board members leaned forward. Ryu Seontae has deuteranopia, red-green color blindness affecting approximately 8% of men worldwide. Zora continued, pulling up her first slide. Most companies would consider this a liability in leadership. I'm going to show you why it's actually an asset in systems optimization. She clicked to the next slide. 2 shipping route maps, identical except one used color coding and one used contrast patterns. Standard logistics software relies heavily on color to convey information. Red for delays, green for on time, yellow for potential issues. Someone with deuteranopia can't distinguish those colors reliably. So they develop compensatory strategies, pattern recognition, spatial relationships, intensity variations. She clicked again. Those compensatory strategies reveal inefficiencies that color-dependent designers miss. She showed them data. How Seontae's routing algorithms outperformed competitors by optimizing for structure instead of color-coded categories. How his systems worked better in low-visibility conditions because they didn't depend on chromatic differentiation. Your CEO doesn't see red and green, Zora said. So he built systems that don't need red and green. And those systems work better for everyone, including the 8% of your workforce and customer base who also have color blindness, plus the millions more with varying degrees of visual impairment. She pulled up her Alfama project, before and after photos showing how adaptive lighting transformed community safety. This is what inclusive design looks like. Not accommodation, innovation. Not designing for people with disabilities, but designing with awareness that bodies and brains are diverse, and that diversity reveals oversights in supposedly normal systems. She looked directly at Kang Min-jae. The motion before you argues that Mr. Ryu's deuteranopia and his personal relationship represent distractions that compromise leadership capacity. I'm arguing the opposite, that his deuteranopia trained him to see structural patterns other executives miss, and that his relationship with me, a designer whose entire methodology is inclusive systems thinking, has expanded his strategic frameworks. She clicked to her final slide. A comparison of Hanbit Maritime's performance metrics before and after Seontae's increased focus on accessibility-informed design. Since Mr. Ryu began consulting with me on inclusive design principles 3 months ago, your company's routing efficiency has improved by 7%. Customer satisfaction scores have increased across demographics, and you've captured new contracts with clients specifically seeking accessibility-compliant logistics partners. She let that sink in. His distraction is generating measurable value. The question is whether this board can recognize innovation when it doesn't look like traditional leadership. Zora stepped back, heart pounding, and waited. The room was silent for 5 full seconds. Then, from the back row, Ryu Myongja stood up. Zora braced for the attack. For Myongja to dismiss her presentation as manipulative performance, to argue that metrics could be cherry-picked, to assert that family legacy mattered more than quarterly improvements. Instead, Myongja began to clap, slowly at first, then with genuine appreciation. That, Myongja said, her voice cutting through the shocked silence, was the most compelling business presentation I've seen in 20 years. Zora's brain short-circuited. Seontae looked equally shocked. Myongja walked to the front of the room, standing beside Zora but addressing the board. I came here this morning prepared to support Mr. Kang's motion. My son's relationship seemed reckless, his priorities misaligned, his judgment compromised by infatuation. She paused. Ms. Ellington has just proven me wrong. She turned to look at Zora directly, and something in her expression had shifted. Not warmth, exactly, but recognition. I was married to a man who hid his weaknesses and called it strength, Myongja said quietly. My son is with a woman who turned his supposed weakness into competitive advantage. That's not distraction. That's partnership. She looked at the board. Any member who votes to remove Ryu Seontae from leadership is voting against innovation, against inclusive design principles that clearly generate value, and against the kind of strategic thinking that separates successful companies from stagnant ones. She sat back down. Kang Min-jae looked like he'd swallowed something sharp. One of the senior board members, a man in his 60s who'd been frowning through Zora's entire presentation, cleared his throat. Ms. Ellington, you said Mr. Ryu consulted with you on inclusive design principles. What's the nature of that consultation? Formal contract? Informal advice? Zora glanced at Seontae, who gave her a subtle nod. Informal collaboration. We met during my Lisbon project implementation. He offered logistics expertise. I offered design methodology. No formal contract, no payment structure, just 2 professionals learning from each other's frameworks. And the personal relationship developed alongside this professional collaboration? Yes, Zora said simply. That's unorthodox, the board member said. But his tone was thoughtful rather than accusatory. Though I suppose many successful partnerships begin with intellectual respect before evolving into personal connection. Another board member spoke up, a younger woman who'd been taking notes throughout. The metrics Ms. Ellington presented show clear value generation. Mr. Kang's motion argues that Mr. Ryu is distracted, but the data suggests heightened focus, How do we reconcile that contradiction? Seontae stood, and Zora stepped aside to let him take the front. You reconcile it, Seontae said, by recognizing that the traditional model of leadership, isolated, emotionally unavailable, hiding any perceived weakness, is outdated and counterproductive. I spent years pretending my deuteranopia didn't exist because I thought visibility of difference meant vulnerability to attack. He looked directly at Kang. Mr. Kang proved me right by weaponizing my medical condition, but Ms. Ellington taught me that vulnerability and weakness aren't the same thing. Hiding my colorblindness meant compensating silently. Naming it meant redesigning systems to work better for everyone. He pulled up a new slide, the one they'd worked on at 3 a.m., exhausted and terrified. This is a proposed expansion of Hanbit Maritime's accessibility framework. Universal design principles applied to every aspect of operations: client interfaces, internal software, communication protocols, physical warehouse environments. Implementing this will cost approximately $5 million and take 18 months. He paused. It will also position us as the first major logistics company with full accessibility compliance, opening contracts with governments and organizations that prioritize inclusive supply chains. The projected ROI is 340% over 5 years. The board members were leaning forward now, interested despite themselves. I'm not asking you to approve my relationship with Ms. Ellington, Seontae said. That's not subject to board approval. I'm asking you to recognize that my leadership has improved, not declined, since we began collaborating, and I'm proposing that we formalize that collaboration, hire Ms. Ellington as an external consultant on inclusive design implementation. Zora's head snapped toward him. They hadn't discussed this. Consulting contract, Seontae continued smoothly, with market rate compensation, clearly defined scope, and no involvement of personal relationship in professional evaluation. She brings expertise we lack. The metrics prove her value. The question is whether this board can separate personal bias from strategic opportunity. It was brilliant. It reframed the entire situation. Not romance compromising business judgment, but business opportunity arising from romance. The board voted 90 minutes later. Kang's motion to remove Seontae from leadership. Rejected. 11-3. Seontae's proposal to hire Zora as accessibility consultant. Approved. 12-2. Myungja abstained from both votes. As the boardroom emptied, she approached Zora and Seontae together. Up close, Zora could see the exhaustion in her face. The weight of decades spent protecting her son from a world she no longer understood. I was wrong, Myungja said quietly. About you. About what my son needed. About how strength manifests. You were protecting him, Zora said, and found she meant it. I understand that. I'd do the same for people I love. But you'd also trust him to make his own choices, Myungja said. I forgot how to do that, or maybe I never learned. She looked at Seontae. I'm sorry. For the investigation, for the buyout offer, for trying to control your life instead of trusting your judgment. I know, Seontae said. He didn't say, it's okay, because it wasn't. But he said, I know. Myungja nodded, accepting the limitation of forgiveness. She turned to leave, then paused. Ms. Ellington, if you're going to be working with our company, you should understand Korean business culture beyond what you can Google. I'd like to introduce you to some colleagues, properly, not as my son's girlfriend, as a professional whose work deserves respect. It wasn't warmth. It wasn't maternal embrace. But it was acknowledgement, and that was more than Zora had expected. I'd appreciate that, Mrs. Ryu, Zora said. Myungja almost smiled. Call me Myungja. We're colleagues now. She left, and Zora turned to Seontae with wide eyes. Did your mother just approve of me? I think she just recognized someone as stubborn as she is, Seontae said, and realized that fighting you was a losing strategy. Jiwoo appeared in the doorway, grinning. That was the most dramatic board meeting I've ever witnessed. And I've been with this company for 8 years. Did we just win? Zora asked, still processing. You won, Jiwoo said. Won, Jiwoo said. Kang is already packing his office. 3 board members approached me after the vote asking about diversity and inclusion consulting for their own companies. And someone leaked the whole thing to business media. You're going to be famous by tomorrow. Famous, Zora repeated weakly. As the designer who revolutionized maritime logistics accessibility. Jiwoo's smile was fierce. Not as a billionaire's girlfriend, as a professional who proved that inclusive design generates value. Later, in Seontae's apartment with Seoul's night skyline glittering outside the windows, Zora finally let herself feel the enormity of what had happened. I have a consulting contract with your company, she said. That's complicated. Very, Seontae agreed. We'll need clear professional boundaries, separate reporting structures so I'm not supervising you, third-party evaluation of your work, transparent documentation of scope and compensation. You've thought about this. I thought about it at 4 a.m. while you were asleep on my couch. He pulled her close, and she let herself sink into him. I want to build something with you, not just a relationship, a partnership that makes both our work better, but only if you want that too. I want it, Zora said. I'm terrified of it, but I want it. Good, he said. Terrified together is our specialty. They stood at the window watching Seoul's lights, and Zora thought about Teresa's words. Real love makes you vulnerable. She'd spent years protecting herself, building walls, refusing help that looked like control. And then Ryu Seontae had shown up in the rain and held her project like it mattered, and taught her that vulnerability wasn't weakness. It was the price of connection. I love you, she said, testing the words out loud for the first time. Seontae went very still. Then he turned her to face him, his hands gentle on her shoulders. Say that again. I love you, Zora repeated, stronger this time. I'm still figuring out what that means and how to navigate all the complications. But I love you. He kissed her then, deep, grateful, real. And when they pulled apart, she saw tears in his eyes. I love you too, he said. Thank you for coming to Seoul, for fighting with me instead of for me, for showing my board that strength looks different than they thought. Thank you for seeing my color blindness as innovation, she said, for respecting my boundaries, for being worth the risk. They had months of complications ahead, professional contracts to negotiate, cultural dynamics to navigate, media scrutiny to endure. But standing there in his apartment with Seoul glittering below, Zora felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope that love could be both vulnerable and safe, risky and worth it. 6 months later, Zora stood in Alfama's community patio watching children play under the expanded lighting network. The system had grown from 2 prototype poles to 40 installations across 3 neighborhoods, funded partly by her Hanbit maritime consulting contract and partly by a coalition of Portuguese municipalities who'd finally recognized the value of safety without surveillance. Teresa stood beside her, watering plants with the satisfied expression of someone who'd watched an impossible dream become infrastructure. You did it, Teresa said. You brought light to places everyone said weren't worth investing in. We did it, Zora corrected. You vouched for me when I was nobody. You protected the project when investors tried to control it. This is as much yours as mine. A car pulled up, sleek, expensive, immediately recognizable. Seontae emerged looking rumpled from the red-eye flight from Seoul, carrying 2 bags of pastel de nata from the bakery near the airport. He'd been splitting time between Seoul and Lisbon for months now, Hanbit Maritime's accessibility framework requiring his oversight, while Zora's consulting contract required her presence. It was exhausting and inefficient, and neither of them would trade it for anything simpler. You're early, Zora said as he approached. I missed you, he said simply, kissing her forehead. And Jiwoo threatened to physically remove me from the office if I didn't take a break. Smart woman, Teresa said, accepting a pastry. You work too hard, both of you. Says the woman who's up at 5 a.m. every day organizing community meetings, Zora pointed out. Teresa smiled. Fair, but I'm old. You two are young enough to pace yourselves. They sat on the patio steps, watching the light respond to movement as elderly residents walked home with groceries, as teenagers gathered near the fountain, as a young mother pushed a stroller through pools of amber glow that made nighttime feel less threatening. How's your mother? Zora asked quietly. Better, Seontae said. She's been meeting with a therapist about control issues and unprocessed grief. She actually apologized last week. A real apology, not a conditional one. That's progress. It is. He was quiet for a moment. She asked if you'd come to Seoul for Chuseok, family holiday. She wants to introduce you to extended relatives as my partner, not as a scandal to manage. Zora felt something warm expand in her chest. I'd like that. They'd been navigating the complexity for months. Professional boundaries at Hanbit Maritime, where Zora reported to the VP of Operations instead of Seontae, public appearances where media still treated them as novelty, family dynamics where Myongja was slowly learning to respect instead of control. It wasn't easy, but it was real. I have something for you, Seontae said, pulling a small box from his jacket pocket. Zora's heart jumped. If that's a ring, it's not a ring, he said quickly. I know we agreed to wait at least a year before making decisions that complicated. This is something else. He opened the box. Inside was a fountain pen, black lacquer with gold accents, beautiful and familiar. That's your mother's pen, Zora said. Was, Seontae corrected. She gave it to me last week and told me to give it to you. Said it belonged to someone who understood the weight of decisions better than she did. Zora picked up the pen carefully, remembering the Lisbon terrace where Myongja had used it to sign a contract that would have bought her off. Now it meant something different. Trust passed between women who'd learned to respect each other despite starting as adversaries. Tell her thank you, Zora said, her voice thick. Tell her yourself at Chuseok, Seontae said. She's expecting you. They sat in comfortable silence as twilight deepened into night. The adaptive lighting system responding to density patterns, creating safe corridors without destroying the neighborhood's intimate scale. Do you remember the first night we met? Zora asked. When you grabbed my project before it rolled into the storm drain? I remember thinking, this woman creates light that makes people feel safe instead of surveilled. I want to know how she sees the world. And now? Now I know, Seontae said, taking her hand. You see the world as it could be if we designed for dignity instead of just function. You taught me that my deuteranopia wasn't something to hide. It was a lens that revealed oversights other people missed. You taught me that vulnerability isn't weakness. It's the cost of real connection. Zora leaned against him, watching her light work in the darkness. You taught me that accepting help doesn't mean losing autonomy, she said. That money can be a tool instead of a trap if the person offering it respects your boundaries. That love can be both vulnerable and safe if you choose someone who sees you as whole instead of broken. Teresa had gone inside, leaving them alone with the light and the night and each other. I'm going to ask you to marry me eventually, Seontae said quietly. Not now. We agreed to wait, but eventually. So you should know. I'm planning to ask Teresa's permission first. Zora laughed, surprised. Why Teresa? Because she's the person who validated your work when nobody else believed in you. Because she protected you from predators disguised as patrons. Because she's family in the ways that matter. He looked at her seriously. Your mother's approval matters, but Teresa's matters too. Zora felt tears burn behind her eyes. You're going to make me cry in public. We're in Alfama at 9 p.m. Nobody's watching us. Someone's always watching, Zora said. We're the interracial couple that broke corporate Korea's assumptions about leadership and colorblindness. Fair point, Seontae admitted. Should I propose somewhere more private? You should propose exactly when and how feels right, Zora said. But not yet. We still have complications to navigate and professional boundaries to maintain, and your mother's extended family to meet. Let's get through those first. Practical and romantic, Seontae observed. That's very you. I learned from the best, she said, and kissed him under the light they'd built together. Adaptive, inclusive, designed for dignity instead of spectacle. Behind them, someone took a photo. They both laughed, used to it now, no longer afraid of visibility. Let the gossip sites speculate. Let the media reduce them to headlines. Let the skeptics doubt that love could survive wealth gaps and cultural differences and corporate pressure. They knew the truth, that love wasn't about perfect compatibility or easy circumstances. It was about choosing each other every day despite complications, about building systems that honored both people's autonomy, about recognizing that vulnerability was strength when shared with someone trustworthy. Zora Ellington had crossed paths with Ryu Seontae on a rainy Lisbon night, and instantly, though neither of them knew it yet, both their worlds had become brighter, not because he saved her, not because she fixed him, but because they saw each other clearly. Deuteranopia and determination, wealth and work ethic, fear and courage, and chose to build something together that honored both their lights. If this journey of radical vulnerability, impossible choices, and love that defied every expectation touched you, let us know in the comments. What moment squeezed your heart the most? Subscribe and stay with us. More stories about people who choose connection over comfort are